So, hello, my name is Andrew Holbrook. I'm here from the Edgewood College Library, and it is March 8th, 2025. We're at Cincinnati in the apartment of
me, Isabel Rafferty.
And we're here to record the oral history of Sister Isabel Rafferty, who was a student and teacher at Edgewood College.
Wow.
So, Sister Isabel, thank you for taking some time to talk to us about your life and your experiences. Could we begin by saying a little bit about where you are from and where you grew up?
That's also a profound question. Where are any of us from, really? Well, technically, I was born in the northwest of England, in a town called Wigan, in Lancashire. And I grew up in the 1950s. And we moved when I was we moved when I was 7, and we moved when I was 10 to another town called Bolton. And I forgot what else you asked me. So I grew up there with a brother who's 2 years younger than I, and a sister who's 5 years younger than I, and then a sister who is 13 years younger than I. So I had a sibship of 3 for a while, and now we're 4.
What was your early schooling like?
I attended St. Patrick's School. Well, it's a different system over there. You're in primary school until you're 11, and then you go into a secondary school when you're 11 till 16 or 18, and then university. So, when I was 11, I passed this exam called the 11 Plus. And the 11 Plus was a national exam given to all 11-year-olds. It doesn't say you to Hogwarts, but it does separate you into the type of education that you get. So I passed the 11 Plus, so my education was very academic. So that was, I think, really important because it gave me the opportunity early on to get a wide range of subjects taught by really good teachers. So that was one of the benefits of passing the 11 Plus. It wasn't as good for the 98% who didn't pass. They had other kinds of education, but I'm just always grateful for that. Now they don't do that anymore because even though it was good for the people who passed, it was not as good, for the rest of the community. So that's now more on an even keel. But I was one of the beneficiaries of it.
Mm-hmm. What subjects interested you the most during that time in your intellectual development?
English literature. I had a great teacher for English literature and English language. History, I had a marvelous history teacher, Miss Pierpont. Oh, she was fierce. She was really good stuff. History and art. Art was just a natural environment. I didn't have to think about doing it. I had to work hard for the others. I didn't like Latin too much. And I struggled with French. But, mathematics was not my forte. Though my sister's a mathematician, I didn't get that gene. But I'm grateful, I'm really grateful for that education I had. It stood me in good stead all these years. Mm-hmm. Geography was fun, and geology. I guess I had a wide range of interests. Physics, no, I preferred biology. Physics and chemistry, but biology was very interesting.
So your interests were very diverse as a young person.
Yes, yes. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I look back, I am very grateful that I had the education that I had.
When you mention English literature, I'm curious, what did you read when you were growing up?
Well, of course, all the Shakespeare plays, Wordsworth, because we're in the north of England, so it was just lovely, like the Romantic poets. But And all, the usual Jane Austen, with the Brontes, all of that stuff. It was good. And my youngest sister lived in Howard for a long time, so I got to tour the Bronte parsonage and walk over the moors. So it's nice and Wordsworth. I mean, it was just not far from where we lived. So just to be able to see the places, the stonework, the valleys, the hills, it makes me nostalgic when I think about it. But I just took that for granted.
Wow. You've mentioned your siblings a few times. Were you close to your siblings growing up?
I am the eldest. They might have a different take on it. But when I was left in charge, I was in charge. And I tried, these many years, to be less bossy. They might disagree with how successful I have been on that. I think I've improved. Yeah. Oh, they're good. And in terms of values, I mean, my parents were both Catholic. We went to Catholic school. My father, after he retired, was both parents were daily mass people. He'd walk 2 miles to the church to go to mass in his later years and 2 miles back. And so I guess I grew up steeped in a traditional faith. And I'm grateful for that rootedness and for the rootedness with family. It was very family-oriented. Lots of gatherings and things. So I'm grateful for that. It stood me in good stead.
Mm-hmm. While we're on the topic of your family, what did your parents do for a living?
It was the 50s. What do you think my mom did? Her job was to be home. And I think she encouraged the girls, to consider careers. I think part of that was her, and my dad was a bit on the Victorian side early on because he learned from his father, so it was a bit Victorian upbringing. They might differ, but when I think back on it, I thought, oh, okay. But there again, I'm grateful. My dad worked for Montague Burton's the tailors till I think the late 60s when his department was closed because that's when they had the big globalization. Things were being shipped out to other countries to get made and then re-imported. So it's hard to see change. And I guess being born in the 50s, I've seen so much change, even on a global scale. So, and it's still unfolding.
It sure is.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that art was a subject you were drawn to.
Yeah, literally. No pun intended. Yes. I remember the first place I lived, the homes had slate roofs, and installed the slate would blow off, and you get these pieces of slate broken up, and they had large pavements. And so I remember using these pieces of slate to draw on what we would call now the sidewalk, but they didn't. In England, they don't call it a sidewalk. Forgotten what they call it. But anyway, so drawing was very early in my recollection. And then being in the first reception class, I remember standing at an easel. I'd never had an easel before. And painting. And I remember I was painting something and the paint ran down the thing. And I made it into something else. I have no idea what it was. But the teacher came, looked at it, got the principal. They came, looked at it, and I was paraded around to the big kids' classrooms with this painting. And I don't remember what it was, but I do remember the paint running and me adjusting something. Wish I had it. It'd be fun to see. But that's my earliest memory of painting and drawing.
Huh. Were there artists you were interested in growing up, or art styles that you were attracted to in your early days as an artist?
I remember my dad taking us to the Bolton Art Museum and looking at the collections that they had there. We didn't go to the big city of Manchester, so I didn't see too much of that. We had these wonderful encyclopedias. It was called Arthur Mee's Children's Encyclopedias, and there were at least, I don't know whether there were 10 or 20, a lot of them, and they had lots of. They mostly were in black and white, but they had lots of different topics inside of each one of them, and I used to love just looking at those. If I think personally now, I've had the benefit from Sister Stephanie's daughter of doing, the kind of an overview of art history, and I do like realism, and I learned for a while. I did quite a bit of surrealist type paintings and some conceptual pieces, but now I am more drawn to the beauty that I see outside around me. How do I translate that into pigment and shapes on canvas now? So I kind of come full circle, doing a little segue into digital stuff for about 14 years.
I know we will revisit art a number of times as we get into your later years at Edgewood, but I wondered if we could talk a little bit about your entrance into religious life. Before we started recording this interview, you were describing the first congregation that you joined before learning of the Cincinnati Dominicans.
Correct.
Could you take us back through
a
little
I
bit?
went 2 for 1. Well, when I entered here, I said, I'm the recycled one. Well, I was very attracted to the work done by the Poor Sisters of Nazareth, who did care of the elderly. So in my teenage years, I used to go there every Sunday to their nursing home, which was called an old people's home in those days. It was rather large. And I helped just with setting the afternoon tea out, or folding down the beds, filling the hot water bottles for the evening, that kind of things. And I got a lot of kudos for doing that. I had to do some save stuff at home, but I didn't get kudos for that. So, and I liked the sisters who were there. So Sister Eric, she was young and very interesting, and Sister Barnabas, who had the floor upstairs. So getting to know them, no, I wouldn't say as people, but they were all kind to me, and they were grateful for my help, I think. So I thought, well, that's another whole story I haven't heard, because, what is this mystery of the meaning of our lives? And at some point, I must have been quite a precocious child, or reflexive, because I remember it's the God thing. It's not, this is a nice thing to do, but there was something about the mystery of God that appealed, or not that so much appealed, but it enthralled me. I remember my grandma Burns, my mother's mother, in whose house I was born, saying, she introduced me to the God of mystery. She'd say, when things were happening, well, it's a mystery. It's just a mystery. We don't know it now, but we'll know it when we're dead. We'll know the reason behind. So this God of mystery kind of enthralled me. Still does, still does. But it's different. The God that I knew as a child has widened and expanded and totally leaves you without words, really. And some of that I can take back to Edgewood as well. because when I was a student there, oh, I wish I could remember her name, sister. She taught religious traditions of the East. And that was also I thought, okay, Judaism, okay, Christianity, okay. But I wasn't familiar until I became a student at Edgewood with all these other religious traditions. And that was very expansive too, as you can see from some of my artwork over there. It's just... Anyway, I lost track. Where are we?
So, what age were you when you entered the Poor Sisters of Nazareth?
Oh, they got a surprise when I filled in my forms. When they found I was only 16, they said, "No, you're a little too young." And then, I can't remember exactly what happened, but they must have changed their mind, because I did enter at 16. When I look at 60-year-olds now, I go, "What? You gotta be kidding." You know what I think of my poor parents? I was so gung-ho about the adventure. I didn't think at all about the absence I was creating, the space I wouldn't be in their home. So if I'd have thought of that, I probably wouldn't have been able to do anything. But I am grateful for the way my life was unfolding.
And it was during that time period that you came to the United States for the first time.
Correct. This is my foreign mission.
Can you narrate a little bit of your coming to America story? Because before we recorded this interview, you said that you felt at home here from the very beginning, and I'm curious if you could talk about that.
A little bit. That's a little bit might be hard to do it a little bit. So, too many adventures, too many stories. Well, there were these two stories before you even get to the airport. So maybe we'll save that for another time. I think it's when I got to Wisconsin I felt at home. Because when I initially came from Heathrow to Los Angeles, I'd never been on a plane, and there I was. I didn't know anything about wing flaps. I had a window seat, and I'm looking out the window on this plane. Wings started doing something peculiar. So now I know about wing flaps, and that's perfectly okay. When I landed, I was in LAX. And I just followed all the people, and they had a sign saying, "Aliens, this way." I was like, "Excuse me, I'm not an alien, I'm British." Because aliens to me were the little green people who lived someplace else like Mars. Well, Martians are green. But anyway, so that was a little alarming, and I had to negotiate whatever they did before the TSA. And I finally came to the baggage claim that I'd never seen before. And I finally got a bag. So in my hand, I had my pocket, I had a $5 bill, a £5 note, and an address. But I was anticipating somebody would be there to meet me at LAX, but nobody showed up. I saw a phone on the wall, but I didn't know how to use it. So I went outside with my suitcase to a taxi rank. And I said, "I have a $5 bill. Can you take me to this address?" And 3 people refused. The third person took me. God knows where he took me, all around the houses. But we finally arrived at where I needed to be, the Nazareth House, the regional headquarters for the Sisters of Nazareth. So I went in and rushed to the desk and said, "Can you please pay the taxi outside?" And she looked at me and said, "We're not expecting you until tomorrow." I said, "Well, I'm here." So that's how I got to Los Angeles. I didn't have sunglasses. So when I went down to San Diego after getting over my jet lag, it's so beautiful. Palm trees I'd never seen. I'd never seen oranges grow on trees. And I remember thinking, it's a little bit like stepping from a black and white TV into a color TV, and now I learned the importance of sunglasses. So when I came to Wisconsin, that's the bit that felt like home.
Can you think of why it felt that way? Is that something you can put your finger on?
No, not really, but it is, I am a feeling being. So, you just get a sense of, it just felt like home.
At what point did you first hear about Edgewood?
Well, actually, Angela Donovan, the campus minister, had come to visit someone in San Diego, the Nazareth house where I was. So I remember talking with her, and she told me she was a campus minister at Edgewood. And I remember taking her out to the zoo, San Diego Zoo, so showing her around a little bit. I think I was invited to do that by the superior. But it was really nice to hear see this sister who wasn't dressed the way I was, who, she was just really interesting. And I remember asking her how she came to choose to be at Edgewood. And, she talked about discernment and how she would discern what her next move would be. And to me, that was like, wow, you can really actually discern what you're going to do next, as opposed to receiving a tap on the shoulder. Excuse me, sister, you're moving to such and such a place. Yes, mother. Thank you, mother. So to see someone, with that level of freedom to, given the responsibility to do her own discernment, was eye-opening. So when I was sent to Stoughton, Wisconsin, I still needed to get that darn educational certification to teach legally, I suppose. So that's when Edgewood, I thought, do I go to UW or do I go to Edgewood? And Edgewood seemed homier because it was smaller and there were sisters there. So I felt more at home there too. So I took some of my classes there. I taught second grade during the day, and I don't know if it was weekend degree, but I know I went to Edgewood to get whatever were needed for this qualification.
So you were teaching in Stoughton and taking courses at Edgewood.
Yes, but the courses were things like, I don't know, American history, which was necessary. Because I only saw John Wayne, and things like that, beyond the 13 colonies. So, don't know. I can't remember the others, but I know it was good because, I had to drive all the way there myself. And the living for the community that I was in was very confined. You were in the house most of the time, or you were working next to the house, or, you didn't really go out and about in the world. So here I was driving down Monroe Street, looking for Edgewood College. So in that sense, it was freeing as well. Once I would stop being nervous about how to get there and back in time for the next lot of stuff at home.
What was it like being a student at Edgewood during that part of your Edgewood experience?
Well, because I was in habit, it was a bit odd. If you're in a habit, people just look at you. And I don't know what they're assuming, but they don't really see you as a person. They see the habit. And for whatever it represents to them and whatever stereotype it has for them, you're either put up on a pedestal or just ignored. So I didn't find that I didn't have that experience. I just remember the last of Charlotte Meyer's classes. We went, at the end of the semester, we went to the Laurel for, I don't know, it was a hamburger or something, and here I am, creeping into it in a full habit, sitting there feeling a little out of place. But, yeah, But when I left the Sisters of Nazareth and was a full-time student at Edgewood, I just fit in. I just blended in. I looked normal, well, normal as I could look. And that was a whole different experience, really, really good.
Could you describe that transition a little bit more, your choice to leave the Sisters of Nazareth and your choice to continue as a full-time student at Edgewood? And
How long do you have? So I'd have to delete a lot of the stories. So the choice. Well, because I knew I wanted to return to America, after having gone home technically for my home visit after 3 years in this country, but in reality, only given a one-way ticket. So really, there wasn't the sisters didn't really want me coming back. I don't know what all the issues were, but I don't know really. But I wanted to come back, and at home I was at Edgewood. So I returned. When I returned, there's another about 500 stories, but I was happy to be in this little, I guess it was a studio apartment in a house on Jefferson Street. And then I was able to get grants. I got a Pell Grant. I think I might have got an Edgewood grant. And I had a work-study grant. So I did pots and pans for Phil. And I also, I forgot, I was also a student worker for the art department. So that's where I saw a lot of art history, because I sorted all the slides for all the art history lectures, and I tidied up after various teachers. And so I forgot where I am. You've set me down so many of these neural pathways. So here I am at Edgewood. I just loved it. I got to know some of the students really well. And that was helpful to me because I wasn't used to not being in a habit. I found at least one safe person who I could learn from, how she did stuff and how she navigated, paying the rent and all of this stuff. And I hung out with the theatre students and the cast. I remember the after parties. What else did I do? It was just an opportunity to learn more things. Oh yes, and I should have been done in a semester, but Sister Elizabeth Divine invited me to consider doing an add-on major. So I had 3 glorious years of just doing studio art, which I knew I needed to do if I was going to do anything with art. So I was very grateful for that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the sisters were marvelous. I had Sister Stephanie Stowden for painting, Elizabeth Divine for drawing and printmaking. I had Ruella Bouchanville for sculpture and ceramics. Kenneth Krosner was there doing photography, but I didn't take any photography. But I was her work study person. I also worked with the chemicals in that lab, now that I think about it. And I don't know if Bob Terrell had been hired at that time. I know it could have been hired shortly after, because I think it was still when Sister Elizabeth Divine was there that he was hired. So it was just really lovely. And we had Esther was just down the hall. We had remarkable women at that place. They were such wonderful women. Yep. I was very blessed to be there.
And you are part of a long tradition in the Cincinnati Dominicans of sisters who have been trained as artists.
Right. I didn't know that at the time. And when I entered, they had just closed the Villa Skippenhoyer. So I missed out on the Florence gig.
Is that right? I was going to ask you how connected
closed
you...
it. Elizabeth had been there and Stephanie had been there, so I heard about it, but I never put myself in, there, which is fortunate because there was no there once I got there. Yeah. But we were lucky. We know a lot of our sisters. Joanne Daly's still living, and I think she was there as printmaker. Rosemary Conway, so we had a lot of really good people. And a lot of people who didn't use art as their main focal point or career path, but were really good at it, So it was good to, I felt at home in there too. And when we entered, Reg and Evie and I and Mary, the congregation was celebrating what they called the Year of the Arts. So I remember our entrance ceremony was quite the performance, really. Because everybody came home, so there was I don't know how many we were at that time, at least 400 people in that chapel, maybe more. But it's good to know. There was another good fitting piece. Felt good.
When you were at Edgewood in that era, did you imagine entering the Dominican order? Did you imagine coming back to Edgewood as a teacher? Were those part of your thought process at that time?
Those were a little later. I think when I came back, I had been thinking, I guess I am a romantic at heart, but when I was with my former congregation and realizing that this, the Council of Trent and Pius XII was also quoted, and I was realizing that, this doesn't fit right. I was also aware of the Little Sisters of the Poor, who were founded by Charles de Foucault, and they seemed very authentic. They lived with the poor, and I thought, well, maybe that's something I could think. I would have been Little Sister Isabel of Jesus, and that's so romantic. Fortunately, being a goatherd in North Africa was not in my future. But I did check them out. I went to a couple of places. One of the most important places was Chicago. During Edgewood spring break, I went to Chicago to visit the sisters who lived in this inner city. They wore jean dresses and lived in a tenement. So this is very authentic. But when I realized their understanding of obedience was blind obedience, been there, done that, no way to do it again. Because I don't think that's what I was called to. However, the Little Sisters of Jesus went home to St. Agatha's. I think it was St. Agatha's for church. And our sisters, Kathy Kamarick, who lives down the hall, also worshipped there. And Kathy Kamarick was the vocation person for the Cincinnati Dominicans. So that's how I connected officially with her. So when I had some good conversations, and when I realized, this really isn't, the Little Sisters were just like a pipe dream or a daydream or something, then I didn't really pursue anything, but it was planted in my head. And then I already knew so many of the sisters there and was so impressed by their scholarship, by their kindness, by their affection for each other, by their joy in their life, and by the fun they had when they were together. I thought, this is a pretty good group. So hence one or two tentative trips here to the Mound when they had opportunities for young women who might be interested. So, and then more conversations with Kathy. So then it was more an unfolding of stuff than anything else.
What did you do in the early years after you had entered the Cincinnati Dominicans?
Oh, let's see. Well, there's a 3-year formation program. So after that, I went to the Bronx and taught art at Our Lady of Mercy and Our Lady of Refuge, which was an experience in itself for many reasons. It was creating the program, because there wasn't one. And realizing the upper grades weren't my cup of tea, because for me, for art making, you have to be present, you have to be quiet, you have to be centered, you're focusing on what you do. But 7th and 8th graders in the Bronx did not have that attitude to art. Art was free time, art was playtime. So it was a battle of wills. I did drawing, I did painting, I did a bit of printmaking, and I did a little bit of ceramics. You were given a lump of clay on a board. So I just remember one class, I said, okay, I'd like you to make a 3-dimensional piece that's interesting from all angles. And I got 23 penises in various forms of placidity. Let me try that again. I tried to keep it straight. Okay, so tell me about this. Really? Is it really that interesting? So I learned I don't do well with adolescents. Little people and big people, 5. Adolescents, I probably have too many unresolved adolescent issues myself to cope with them. So that's what I did. And then I went from there to St. Basil's on the south side of Chicago, 55th and Honorary. And I taught English as a second language through Martin Luther King College. I think it was Malcolm X College. And I did some drawings for cards for a lady who wanted to set up a business. And then I applied to the Art Institute of Chicago and got into their art therapy program, which was a joint program between the Art Institute and Rush Press St. Luke's Medical School. So that was a spanning of 2 different worlds as well, because we were looked down on by the art people. And then we were certainly looked down by the med students. But it's an interesting field, to be able to be with people as they process their inner world using art media.
And Edgewood is still fairly unusual in having an art therapy program to this day.
They have an undergraduate art therapy program that they had before I started at Edgewood. And then they took on a graduate program.
Were you part of that development?
No, because I'm aware to be an art therapist in practice, you have to, it's a master's degree program. Unlike music therapy, you can practice as a music therapist with a bachelor's degree. With art therapy, you can't. You have to do art therapy, you need a master's degree plus, I don't know how many thousand hours of supervised work in order to get your registration. And then to get your license, you need either, I think there's only New Mexico that does a direct art therapy license. Other schools now have enfolded into their curriculums counseling. So you take the counseling exams, so you come out with an ATR. Well, you earn an ATR, then you become board certified and you become licensed as well. So it's quite a lot of work. So given the number of art therapy programs in the area, I was kind of surprised that everyone wanted to take on, an art therapy program, because it takes a few years to become accredited. I think now it's accredited. And if you graduate from a non-accredited school, you have a lot more accreditation to get. But I don't know, because I left 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember when I left. So maybe that's all sorted by now.
Could you take me back to when you came to Edgewood as an instructor?
Oh, yes. I'd had a year at Dominican University, so that was helpful to me, very helpful. There were really nice people there. They had good, their backlog was good, and I enjoyed it. So I felt more prepared. Agnieszka Ligenza, who left quite a long time ago, was in the graphic design department, and she wanted to expand from from graphic design courses. So I think the first maybe semester, besides doing the web design and the Photoshop stuff, what was that? Digital art and design. I did forgot the name of the stuff that I taught. I did another course. Oh, calligraphy, not calligraphy. What's the word? delete. Was beautiful lettering. Don't say calligraphy. Anyway, the course where you learn type, about typefaces, type photo fonts. I did that for 2 semesters, I think. But then I moved more into web design, 1 and 2, video for graphic design students, more digital art and design, usability, and I think there's something else at the back of my mind that I taught. I can't remember.
So when did you start teaching at Edgewood?
2010, I think, the January semester. You missed the whole part where I went to San Francisco to get my MFA, because without the MFA, as well as the MA, I couldn't have applied. So that's where I learned the computer arts and media stuff.
Could you take me back to that? Let's cover the ground that we missed. Could you take me back through that time period in between when you earned your MFA?
Well, that was really interesting. San Francisco is such a beautiful city. I think my first year I stayed with the sisters of, can't remember that. There were Dominican sisters who lived they didn't live in the Bay, they lived in the Mission District. Were the Mission Center there? Could be, or maybe not. Anyway, I stayed with them for a year, and I went to, San Francisco State or something downtown to learn a lot of the programs I needed to learn. And then I went, and when I actually started the MFA program, I moved over the Bay to Berkeley. And then I just commuted every day. And since I was living exactly on the San Andreas Fault on Oxford Street, I was grateful that I could get back and forth without imagining the earthquake happening any moment. It's 100-year fault, and it's at least 5 years over, maybe 10 years over by now. Anyway, I loved it once I got over the fear of all of the new technology, all of the new programs, all of the new people, and the bigness and scale of the city. So I just fit in quite well. And I was grateful to graduate. And I got a prize. What did I get the prize? It was, the thesis piece was kind of tough, but I did an installation in one of the galleries that was it was called Sacred Space, and I repurposed the DDR map to know what one goes on. I reprogrammed it. I painted a 5-foot-by-4 painting. It was looking at Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And so I created, I don't know what you even call it nowadays, but it was an installation. You stood on one of the squares and it would open up. So I had many different animations and video interviews with religious leader from each of the traditions. So, and I asked them 4 questions in these 4 different areas. One was sacred scriptures, one was, can't remember what they were. All of those years, all of those efforts, all of those work. Anyway, there are 4 distinct areas. One of them was art. And they spoke to whatever I had asked. And I did have a green screen, so I had the images behind them as well. And then I had these animations in between. After Effects is really good, powerful tool, good to use. Probably forgotten how to use that too now. But, so that was, yeah, I got Best of Show for Installation. So I was quite pleased with myself. Legacy Issues, I programmed it all in Flash, in ActionScript, dead as a dodo. But this is now, it's kind of like the mandalas that are created in sand, the beautiful, no way.
That's a wonderful way to think about it.
All things are passing. Even Edgewood.
In fact, you talked before we began recording about how challenging it was to keep up with some of the technology that you were teaching.
Yes, because I was doing web design. Anybody could create a web page. You know, everybody in high school could have a website. But no, because it was hand coding when I did it, and you weren't really allowed to use anything. But when I came to Edgewood, they had Dreamweaver, so I thought, oh, piece of cake. No. Yes, and the web was changing constantly. So every summer, I would go and take a course in how to keep up with either the After Effects stuff, mostly the web stuff, because that was changing, and still is. You know, even this AI stuff, I left before AI came in. So I'm clueless about AI, and yet it's infiltrated into absolutely everything right now. So it was just the rapid rate, the exponential rate of change for the internet. Oh, well.
Was it hard to balance, if balance is the right word, your digital art with your love of painting?
Well, initially, I used both together. You know, it was like I would create something on the screen and then put like some of the pictures over there. I actually created on the screen first and then I painted them. Or sometimes I'd start to paint something and then I'd go to the monitor and manipulate it in there. So it was a back and forth for a while. And what I realized, I was creating a lot of stuff that had major legacy issues because the software would become out of date. Even though I did things like I kept a Flash standalone player, which will now not work anyway because it says it doesn't live anywhere. So one of the reasons I'm happy to go back to return to the canvas is it feels like a full circle thing, but it's just there, and I don't have to worry, apart from size issues, if I do anything too big. Now I'm doing everything modest size. I don't have to worry about nobody can see it. You know, they can see what is for as long as the materials stay there, but I don't have to worry about, I don't want to be able to play this. Even though I did it on both platforms, it still wouldn't work. I was very grateful to turn what they called my, what did she call them? All the hard courses over to a younger colleague whose brain was much more malleable than mine to take on new stuff. So I was very grateful for that.
How had Edgewood changed when you returned as a teacher compared to when you had been a student?
Well, there was a lot more of it. I think there was DeRicci Hall and Regina Hall, and the library was in the basement of Regina. The theatre was in the basement of Regina. Phil's was where Washburn room is now. That dining hall was there. St. Joseph's Chapel was the same. So it was a smaller campus. Marshall was there. I don't know, because I didn't live on campus. I didn't really pay much attention until it came to my maintenance jobs. So the space was different. There were less young men there. It had become co-ed, but there was still, there might be 2 in a room. I don't know, because I didn't have it to compare it to then. Now, if I look at the changes, the library is beautiful. The science building is beautiful. I wonder about all of the dorms, because if they're not getting filled and students are an issue, it's like, I wish somebody had been really looking ahead to see what was feasible, what was sustainable. I'm grateful that the mounds are more respected and not ignored or walked on now. I'm grateful for that. But what I liked most when I was teaching at Edgewood was the faculty. Sorry, students. They were okay, but they came, you got to love them, and they left. And it was like, you would be bereft. Anyway, so the faculty, and I used to love going back at the end of the summer, those days we had together. It was something I look forward to, and just to see people. And we had really quality, kind people. And it was good. It was good to work with them. They were great colleagues. Yep.
Are there any colleagues you'd like to mention specifically?
Well, if I could remember their names. Well, certainly Bob. Certainly Bob. Melody, who left a while ago. Now, on one Sunday a month, there has been a loyal group that goes to, what's the name of the place? They do a meal program. I think Luke House, and that's Louise Strickner and Amy, somebody or other. And there's about 3 or 4, and they're always there. And the students used to go as well. And some other, the woman who teaches, it's so hard to, when the names disappear, but the people aren't. They're firmly here, and I can still see them. Just can't name them. But those were good experiences, and they're still going. Because I'm still at the mailing list, and I know when they're looking for more people to help out. And that's a big commitment. It's been many, many years. And people contribute to the food, and then they go and cook it, and then they serve it and eat it with the people. So they're a great group. And a lot of the people who've gone to God, Esther and Stevie, they were good souls. Marianne Schutz. I think she was the one that did the religious traditions of the East. She was in the history department. Nancy Ray Weisdorf. Nancy Ray was my, what do you call it when you have to report to them and they keep an eye on you? What's that? Student advisor. She was my advisor. That's right. When I came to Edgewood the first time as a full-time student, and that's when I had this one elective, when I took the drawing class, and about 3 weeks into it, she said, Isabel, I need to see you. I'm just aware they've not had any computer courses. Maybe you should drop the art and take a computer course. And it was like, no. But she has enough left because I took no computer courses afterwards.
How funny the way things played out that you ended up doing both.
Yes, exactly. But I held on to my gums, and I wanted to stay with the drawing and with Elizabeth Devine. And she became a mentor and then a friend. And her nieces were at school at the same time I was. So Betty Jo and Jeannie I'm still in contact with. And it's just so nice to have that touchstone. You know. She was an incredible woman. She was a printmaker, she would say. Her name in religious life was Incarnata. So they called her Inky because, you know, literally, she literally got into it. Yes, so she did I did printmaking 1 and 2 with her. I thought it was going to be a printmaker, but painting was more of what I needed to be about. She is a wonderful woman. And then Stephanie, you know, she could do a one-liner that you wouldn't believe. She was really good. I did painting 2 before I did painting 1, just because of where I came in the semester. So I was always a little bit anxious as a painter. They were wonderful women. There you got them all marching around in my head. And they're never, I think it's the relationships there that are so rich, and many became deep and rich. And I learned so much. I don't think I would have risked evolving as much if I hadn't stood on the shoulders of these women who had risked.
You were the last sister.
Oh, I was. That's
teach
one
at the
standing.
Was that a change you saw coming, or did it come as a surprise?
I didn't. Well, I knew it would happen because I didn't see anyone behind me who was going to be moving into any positions at Edgewood. So it felt like a big responsibility. I know when we had our academic assemblies, when I made any comments, I know I got listened to because of the weight of the sisters behind me. I was aware it's not just me they're listening to, they're listening for, you know, the sisters who they all, well, most of them knew at that time. So what was I talking about?
I had asked you about being the last
that's
sister
one
teaching,
standing.
and if that was a surprise or if it was something that you could see coming.
Or I saw it coming in some ways. I remember when the new class would come, you know, I say I'm Sister Isabel, you know, and I'm actually a historical artifact. Anyway, I really wanted to teach until I was 70, but because he had health concerns, it kind of, I actually left when I was about 69 and a half. I would probably have stayed on longer, but it was a matter of Sister Mary Ellen Gevlinger was leaving, and Maggie Hopkins was leaving, so it was kind of like I had a conversation about, you know, we might all be leaving, so it's like, I have to talk to my department about that. But there again, the enrollment was shrinking. There were great concerns among the upper echelons of administration about the size of courses, the size of classes, and the need to reduce the size of the faculty. So, in a way, it was probably a blessing in disguise. I would have liked to have done one more graduation ceremony, but it's COVID. So, all of that got disconnected. I'm glad I had the opportunity. I've seen a lot of changes. Not too happy with how things are at the moment, because my biggest fear is the loss of the historical memory as senior faculty either chose to leave or retired or left. And it's hard to reestablish that kind of historical link. And I know they have the posters all over the place, you know, truth, justice, and compassion. They have the years and everything. But it has to be a lived thing. And when I was at Edgewood, it felt lived to a certain point. And then it became more, it seemed to me it was more the banners and pushing the values, but not necessarily feeling the lived experience, which is sad. And because, and especially in the education of teachers, because even within the state, I mean, really, in my opinion, Edgewood was for the education of teachers initially, because a lot of our sisters were teachers and they either learned at Edgewood or they learned at Dominican, which used to be Rosary. And so the education department was so important. All of us in liberal arts supported that by giving really good education to those teachers. And then things started to change when, I can't remember which academic dean it was, but changed how students chose their coursework, and changed when who taught those courses changed as well. So I don't know. If I look at Edgewood now, I wouldn't say education is the main thrust of it. I'd say nursing is doing really well. The art department was a really strong department. You know, we had a wide range of options for students. And I think they benefit a lot from it. Right now, I don't know if it gets enough attention. It's lost a lot of faculty. So it's kind of painful to see it like that. But the way of all things.
What do you think it would take to counteract some of those changes?
Well, that's a complex answer, I think. Demographically, we're at a time where many colleges will go under because that generation that should be going to college isn't there. Who knows now, with a total upturn, the political upheaval, who would go to college. So I think that is one of the bigger issues, the student stuff, because we were basically tuition dependent. And I don't know if our endowment is certainly not powerful enough to fix everything. We've done a lot of building lately. And some of that, I think, this is just me, has been at the expense of the faculty, the quality. I mean, the faculty at Edgewood were never well paid. You know, they did it, most of them had a spouse that could help support them. They did it for love, and the sisters didn't get anything. Mm-hmm. Well, hardly anything until, I don't know when it changed a bit. But, so people don't teach there for the pay. And now that most of the senior faculty are gone, if positions are being opened mostly to adjuncts who get paid even less. So it can get a bit demoralizing. So I don't know. Be a big headache to somebody to sort it out. There's been a high turnover too. And I don't know what's going to happen with the DEI stuff at all. We've had 4 presidents in a very short period of time. And when I look at Dominican University, that faces their own challenges, but they had one president for a very long time, and that creates a lot of stability. And so I don't know what they're going to do. I pray for them. I hope that their change to this university status will help. I have no idea really about the upgrad thing. My concern is the curriculum. That to lose control of a curriculum isn't a good thing if you're an educational institution. So I don't know. It's thank God not in my hands. I'm grateful I was there. I've left a lot of blood, sweat, and tears there, and a lot of deep connections I still carry with me.
Before I ask you what you're up to now in your post-Edgewood era, there are two comments that I'd like to revisit. You spoke a few minutes ago about taking risks in your own evolution and feeling comfortable doing so because of the support of the sisters.
And the example, because they already did it.
What ways would you say you have evolved the most? Whether it's as a person or as an artist?
That's the same thing. Because it's not just a separate part. It's all of a piece. I think I've evolved most theologically, considering my background. As an artist, I feel I've come full circle. Subject matter, I don't know. I think I'm still on an evolutionary path for that. As a person, that's still evolutionary too, or at least in process. I hope it's heading in the right direction.
Could I ask you about teaching at Edgewood during COVID?
Yes.
Because that was a major era for anyone who was teaching anywhere.
Right.
And we have possibly not done enough to document what happened on our campus during that time. So could I ask you for your recollections and experiences of teaching during COVID?
The thing that I'm most aware of is we went home on spring break and then we never came back. So it was my last, 2 months or 3 months was online. Now, fortunately, I was doing all the digital stuff. So in theory, each student had access to a laptop. Most of them had their own. I think the big issue was the Wi-Fi, because they didn't live necessarily in a good Wi-Fi zone, because they were mostly from northern Wisconsin and different parts of Wisconsin. So that seemed to be the issue. Now, because I was in the field, I could literally, create the courses, and I kind of knew what I was doing that time. Maybe not now, but I did at that time. So I could do that, and I could create the videos to do the demos and have them watch it. And I could check who had watched the video. And in my 63-minute videos, who had watched them all the way through the 3 minutes, and who had watched them for just 1 minute and gone to the next one, gone on to the next one. So it was surprising to see the people who, really were engaged with the work, and those who were just and then those who really had a hard time getting connected, So I know I had a few phone call conversations trying to help them understand that, if you didn't want any complete, these needed to be done. And, the purpose of doing the video to show how to do whatever I was asking them to do, that was good. And they've all sent their projects, and it was all online. So the project piece, for me, because of the field I was in, it was easier. I think when we went back and people were still wearing masks, I was still taking a class with Bob, just for my own independent study stuff. And I remember thinking it must be really hard to always have a mask. And I think they tried the face shield for a while. But it was a bit scary then because we really didn't understand how the disease was communicated. So that was a little bit rubbish. But I think now we know it's easier to understand. I think I was concerned about who would, if somebody was feeling sick or not sick, whether they had tested positive or not tested positive, and what impact that would have on the rest of the class. If one person is positive and they've been with them for like a week, do we need to close the class? But as I say, it was different working from home.
I'm sorry, I think we need to pause the recording because the
We're not done.
microphone is about to run out of battery. And I wanted to ask you what you've been doing since. So if we could pause the recording, and then we can conclude our conversation.
This must be the longest recording ever.
Yes, I did want to conclude our conversation after we had that brief pause by asking you what you've been up to since Edgewood, because before we were having a conversation, you talked about some ways that you are still in touch.
Oh, yes. It took me a few years to realize I was retired. Because especially when I lived in Madison. And in my head, before COVID, I thought, well, maybe I can just go and visit with faculty, go for coffees, kind of help morale kind of stuff. But that was a no-go because of COVID. So I lived in Madison and Kessel Court, where we had maybe 13 of our sisters living in different parts of Kessel Court. So I had a 2-bedroom apartment, so one bedroom was a studio. So I continued to paint. And then 2 days a week, I would drive down to Footville, Wisconsin, which I had never heard of. But at that time, some of our sisters, maybe, I don't remember how many they were, 12 or 13, sisters moved from here. Sisters were still living at the Marne. But this first group moved to Footville, which was an assisted living facility. So 2 days a week, I would drive down and visit with sisters. And then when COVID happened, we were still doing that. We're visiting through the window. You go around the outside of the building. And it was difficult because many sisters with hearing loss and you had a... So it was difficult, but it was an opportunity to be present to these sisters and to get to know sisters I hadn't really known except as a name or just seen them in the hallway, So I did that. Between that and the painting, that kept me quite occupied, plus committees. I had no committees at Edgewood. I went a few times to Luke House, so I kept that up for a bit. And I also used to go to the Catholic Multicultural Center, because every Tuesday the high school served a meal there, so I did that as well. And then, when I moved here, well, I'm also on 3 congregation committees. What am I on? I'm on the Native Nations Solidarity Initiative. We meet monthly and have homework in between. I'm on the Enactment 3 and 4 committee, which is enactments out of our last chapter. I'm on the Justice Circle committee. I think at this point that's all the committees I'm on. So here I paint and I go down to St. Dominic Villa, which is just down the hill there, which is it's not assisted living. It's whatever the next level of care is that my brain is not telling me. So I visit some of the sisters there, one afternoon and one morning. And then there were 20 of us live here. So we meet as well. We meet monthly for meetings, for birthdays and this, that and the other. And we meet, we support the sisters at the villa doing different things. We have a social once a month, and we join them for Sunday liturgy. So that's, and I paint. Yeah, and I've done maybe 10 paintings since I came here. They're not all here, they've all gone to other halls. But that's one of the blessings with being here. A nice win over at the Y in Dubuque. We are not, as some people say, in the middle of nowhere. We are only 10 minutes, 15 minutes from Dubuque, big city, biggish. Yeah.
Well, Sister Isabel, thank you very much for letting us be here.
You're welcome.
And for taking the time to record this oral history.
You're very welcome, and I hope you can delete the appropriate parts. We're most grateful. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Save me going all the way to Edgewood.
This has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And now we get to eat.